Welcome to How to RC. Somebody asked me a question. How do I get at the bottom motor screw on my new How to RC motor mount? And that's a good question. I'm going to answer that question. But the reason you would need to get at that bottom screw would also entail actually setting the gear lash. So we're going to talk about that. Now, every once in a while I get complaints about, oh, your motor mount's crooked and it's tearing up my spur gear. And I think, no, you don't know how to set the gear lash and your motor mount's mounted crooked on the chassis. Because if you set it up properly, your gears will wear for years and years. So, a couple of things you need to do is, the gears need to be lined up perfectly with one another so that they mesh perfectly. Okay? So you're going to have to do that with the motor mount, which is what we're going to get to here in a minute. They can't be out of line and they can't be crooked, or you're going to tear your gears up and wear them. And that's easy enough to do on the T-Maxx motor mount. You'll notice that the holes in the chassis are not round. They're elongated. And that's so that you can move the motor mount back and forth. That's so that you can move the whole motor away from and toward the gears on the transmission. You can move it side to side and adjust the gear lash. But the holes are a little big for 3mm screws, and you can also get some movement this way in here, okay? Which is how people get stuff out of line. So what you're going to have to do is put your pinion gear on and bolt the motor into the motor mount, but leave the screws just tight enough so that the motor doesn't move around easily, but so that you can move it. You put the motor mount on the chassis, line the holes up with the holes in the chassis, put a couple of screws in, and I'm going to use this one up here, and I'm going to put this one in here that is diagonally opposite the first one I put in. In other words, opposing corners here to hold the motor mount flat. Alright, now the first thing you need to do is adjust your pinion gear so that it lines up perfectly with the spur gear, and the whole width of the teeth of the pinion gear are engaging the whole width of the teeth on the spur gear, like I showed you with the two other gears a minute ago. And then you can tighten the set screw up on your pinion gear. Okay, so you tighten the pinion gear up just as tight as you can get it. So now we want to move the whole motor mount. The motor's firmly attached at the center of the slotted holes. So now we want to move the motor over toward the spur gear, right up against the spur gear, nice and tight. It shouldn't move around, and we're going to take the motor mount back off of the chassis. So this is a 21 tooth pinion gear, and you can get 25 tooth pinion gear on here all the way down, move the motor that way to probably a 12 tooth pinion gear. So then tighten up your motor mounting screws. That was the question. How do I get to this motor mounting screw? That's how you get to it. Now you go ahead and put the screws back in and put the motor mount on. Okay, so I slid the motor mount back and forth a little bit until I can see that the gears are perfectly lined up with one another in this fashion here, so that they're perfectly lined up like this. And so that if I hold the pinion gear on the motor, and I can move this spur gear just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. That's all you need. That's just about perfect. Now, without moving anything, get back in there and tighten those motor mounts down hard. Those are good, hard stainless steel bolts that come with your motor mount, and they're just the right length. What I do is I will take a Velcro strap and bring it up through here and up through here and strap that battery right down. I'll get a battery strap and show you. Alright, so here's a Velcro strap. Now I'm going to take it and put it down here at the end of the chassis. See that? I'm down on top of the bulkheads back here and the differential, and I'm going to feed it in there. So it's coming down here in between the bulkheads at the rear of the chassis. It comes up here, and now I'm going to push it up this rounded cutout out here in the motor mount, and now you can see, now you can strap that battery right down, and that battery's not going anywhere. That's how I hold them down here. That's how to get the bottom screw on your motor mount tightened up. That's it for How to RC today.